The year is 1991. Just as the Cold War seemed to thaw, the U.S. government was pouring billions into a dream, a single aircraft capable of flying anywhere on Earth in under 2 hours, the National Aerospace Plane, or NASP. But deep inside the towering headquarters of the nation's premier aerospace contractor, a different kind of flight plan was being executed, a secret maneuver involving money, not Mach speed. How could a program deemed vital to national security become the ultimate casualty of internal corporate ambition? The answer lies buried in dense financial ledgers, in the quiet reassignment of millions of taxpayer dollars, funds that vanished from the cutting edge of aerospace research and reappeared somewhere far more convenient: Boeing's bottom line. The sheer audacity of it rewrites the story of American innovation. Chapter 1: The Invisible Line. July 1989. The presidential decision on the National Aerospace Plane has been issued, a mandate giving Boeing and its partners the green light to chase the ultimate aerospace frontier, building upon earlier work like DARPA's Copper Canyon project. The expectation is pure science, pure defense investment. But behind the scenes, the reality of government contracting is always about overhead. For every dollar spent on direct labor, the engineers actually designing the X-30 concept, roughly 43 cents is spent on overhead. That percentage is sacred territory, rigorously policed by the Cost Accounting Standards Board. In 1990, the orders are flowing. Boeing delivered 875 jets that year, signaling a period of immense corporate health. Then, the calendar flips to 1991. The orders slow down to just 257 jets. The gap between the massive federal contracts and the slowing commercial market creates immense pressure on internal budgeting. It is often described as having a clean, chlorine-like, but burnt smell. The smell of ozone. The smell of something burning too hot. The internal review begins not with an external investigation, but with a subtle shift in accounting procedures. Finalized around the same time amendments to the federal aviation regulations were being implemented. Chapter 2: The Reallocation. The central mystery centers on the specific dollar amount diverted from the NASP budget. It wasn't cash being stuffed into briefcases. It was far more sophisticated. It was the reclassification of expenses. A single executive decision, perhaps buried in an SEC filing related to executive compensation programs, allowed a percentage of the highly scrutinized NASP research costs to be masked as general corporate overhead expenses that were less trackable and more flexible. When the GAO began their review in 1992, they were looking at the program's costs, schedule, and feasibility. But they were looking at numbers already massaged by management. Think of the audit documents, stacks of them, detailing every cost center. The feeling is one of overwhelming complexity, the sound of frantic keyboard clicks hidden behind closed mahogany doors. Management responsible for implementing these compensation structures realized they could balance their books, satisfy shareholders, and potentially pad bonuses by leeching funds meant for hypersonic research and redirecting them toward cushioning immediate corporate shortfalls. The question remains: which specific level of Boeing management signed off on this systemic shift? Accountability becomes a ghost in the machine, a phantom that no single person claims to have seen. Chapter 3: The Aftermath and the Silence. The immediate fallout wasn't public, it was internal. It manifested as crises of ethics, whispered confrontations in hallways where accountability was demanded but never formally delivered. The regulatory framework governing this entire relationship, the CASB rules finalized in April 1992, was supposed to prevent exactly this kind of manipulation in government contracting. Yet, the diversion happened just before or during the finalization of those tougher rules, suggesting either willful ignorance or brazen foresight. Imagine the scene of the inquiry. Congressional reports gathering dust, highlighting the failure of oversight. The defense procurement officials who signed the contracts are left scratching their heads, realizing that the integrity of a strategic national asset was compromised not by an outside threat, but by a perceived need for internal corporate solvency. Were any deviations from FAR standards formally linked to this event? The paper trail suggests a deliberate camouflage, a complex financial architecture designed to withstand scrutiny. The executive severance packages signed in the years following 1991 are the final, silent testament to the success of the diversion, rewards paid out based on financial metrics that were allegedly inflated by using restricted government research money. The silence surrounding the specific names responsible is deafening, protected by layers of corporate insulation, leaving the knowledge gap wide open about who truly benefited from sacrificing the national aerospace plane. The dream of flying into space from a runway was delayed, perhaps permanently, while the corporation's immediate balance sheet received an unauthorized lift. Chapter 4: The Hypersonic Chill. The systemic siphoning of funds had a chilling effect that permeated far beyond the accounting department. It reached the engineering labs, the very crucibles where the dream of the NASP was supposed to be forged. The National Aerospace plane was a three-stage beast. The initial atmospheric flight vehicle, the propulsion system, the revolutionary air-breathing rocket engine, the BE-7, and the complex thermal protection materials required to withstand Mach 25 re-entry. When the money started to disappear, these three pillars began to crack, not with dramatic explosions but with the slow rot of underfunding. Suddenly, materials testing schedules slipped. Contracts for specialized alloys, contracted to boutique research firms, were delayed or canceled outright. The narrative shifted subtly within the project meetings. Instead of discussing achieving the 2-hour global transit goal, conversations devolved into damage control, how to meet the next milestone with 80% of the budgeted resources. Engineers, veterans of the Apollo era who had dedicated their careers to pushing physical boundaries, began to notice the shift in managerial focus. The urgency that defined groundbreaking research was replaced by an almost bureaucratic lethargy. If a team proposed an innovative but expensive solution for the scramjet inlet design, a critical component for sustained hypersonic flight, the answer was no longer, find a way to make it work. It became, find the cheapest alternative that will look acceptable for the next quarterly review. This erosion of commitment is far more damaging to long-term technological advancement than any single budget cut announced by Congress. It poisons the well of innovation from within. The pursuit of the best solution was replaced by the pursuit of the defensible solution on paper. Consider the specialized ceramics needed for the leading edges of the airframe. These materials had to perform flawlessly under extreme thermal gradients. Funding for the high-temperature vacuum furnaces required for final certification testing was suddenly diverted. The paperwork cited unforeseen capital expenditure requirements elsewhere in the division, a euphemism that, in retrospect, points directly toward balancing the books against the backdrop of a collapsing commercial airline market. The result? Testing was pushed to lower than optimal parameters, creating a false sense of security about the vehicle's structural integrity. The GAO reports, while they focused on schedule overruns and technical hurdles, missed this crucial nuance. The technical hurdles were being exacerbated, if not outright manufactured, by financial starvation. The true system failure wasn't a flaw in the engine design, it was a flaw in the corporate incentive structure. The ambition of a few executives superseded the strategic imperative of the nation. Chapter 5: The Regulatory Fog. The regulatory environment of the early 1990s was an evolving minefield, particularly concerning government cost accounting standards. The Cost Accounting Standards Board (CASB) rules were designed to ensure government contractors charged the right costs to the right contracts. The NASP, being a high-profile, politically charged project, should have been under a microscope, yet the very structure of how these rules were applied allowed for the smoke and mirrors operation to take hold. The key mechanism utilized was likely the reclassification between direct costs traceable specifically to the X-30 research and indirect costs overhead administrative support general R&D. By inflating the indirect cost pool with expenses that originated in the NASP budget, Boeing could then recover those inflated overhead rates across all government contracts, thereby successfully hiding the diverted NASP funds within a massive generalized recovery mechanism. When the GAO auditors arrived, they were presented with a meticulously constructed web of invoices and labor-hour distributions. Tracing a specific dollar from the engine metallurgy budget to a specific executive bonus in 1993 required a level of granular access that contracting officers rarely possessed, and which independent auditors were often structurally prevented from obtaining in a timely manner. The Federal Acquisition Regulation (FAR) mandates transparency, but transparency relies on honest disclosure. When the disclosure itself is built upon a foundation of deliberate misclassification, transparency becomes an illusion. The subsequent investigations into defense contracting scandals in the mid-90s, the tailhook incidents and various procurement overcharges, demonstrated a widespread cultural apathy towards strict adherence to cost principles when massive amounts of taxpayer money were involved. The NASP diversion fits neatly into this pattern, but with a unique twist. It wasn't about overcharging for a known part. It was about robbing an emerging technology program to subsidize a flagging commercial division. The silence from the Defense Contract Audit Agency DCAA during the critical period of 1991 to 1993 is perhaps the most damning evidence of the system's failure. The DCAA is tasked with reviewing the adequacy and accuracy of contractor accounting systems. If the systems were truly adequate, this level of maneuverability should have been flagged immediately upon the sharp transition from peak commercial sales in 1990 to the downturn in 1991. The speed with which the financial stabilization occurred, masking the commercial slump, strongly suggests that the DCAA either lacked the authority, the will, or the necessary